The photograph arrived in the mail on a Wednesday morning. No return address, no note, no explanation, just an envelope. Standard white, handwritten address, and inside, a single photograph, printed on glossy paper, the kind that comes from a drugstore photo kiosk. The photograph showed a woman sitting at a kitchen table, reading a book, a cup of coffee beside her, morning light coming through a window to her left. The woman in the photograph was Laura Crane, and the photograph had been taken through her own kitchen window, without her knowledge, without her consent, 3 weeks ago. Laura Crane was 39 years old. She lived alone in a small house on the edge of a town called Millhaven, in upstate New York. She worked remotely as a technical writer for a software company. She had moved to Millhaven 2 years earlier, after a difficult divorce, looking for the particular kind of quiet that cities can't provide. She had found it. She had been grateful for it. She held the photograph for a long time. She recognized the morning. She recognized the book. She had finished it 2 weeks ago and returned it to the shelf. She recognized the blue cardigan she was wearing, which she had not worn since. She recognized everything about the image, except for the fact that someone had been standing outside her window, watching her, and had decided to remind her of it. She called the police. The officer who came to her door was young, polite. He looked at the photograph carefully and asked the right questions and filled out a report and told her that what she had received constituted harassment, potentially stalking, and that they would look into it. He also told her, gently but honestly, that without a return address or fingerprints or any identifying information on the envelope, there was limited investigative action available to them at this stage. He told her to vary her routines, keep her curtains closed, note anything unusual. He left. Laura stood in her kitchen. She looked at the window the photograph had been taken through. She closed the curtain. For 3 days she heard nothing. She kept the curtains closed. She varied her routes. She checked her locks. She downloaded a security camera app and ordered 2 cameras that would arrive by the end of the week. On the 4th day, a second envelope arrived. Same white envelope, same handwriting, no return address. Inside, another photograph. This one showed her walking to her car. Early morning. She was wearing her gray coat. Her keys were in her hand. The photograph had been taken from a distance, from somewhere across the street or further. Whoever had taken it had used a lens. They had been planning this. This was not someone who had stumbled onto her window by accident. This was someone who had equipment, who had prepared. She called the police again. The same officer came. He took the second photograph. He told her they were escalating the report. He asked if she had any idea who might be doing this. Laura thought about it for a long time. She said, "I don't know, but I think I know where to start." She started with her divorce. Her ex-husband was a man named Paul Crane. The marriage had ended after 7 years, badly, in the particular way that endings are bad, when one person is ready to leave and the other is not. Paul had not taken it well. He had taken it in the way that some people take things, quietly, in public, and not quietly at all in private. There had been a period of 6 months immediately following the divorce, during which he had called frequently, shown up at places she was, sent messages that fell just short of the threshold for a restraining order, but not short enough that she didn't feel the weight of them. And then, about 14 months ago, it had stopped. She had assumed he had moved on. She pulled up his social media profile. He had not posted in 4 months. She found his address. He was still living in the city where they had lived together. Through a mutual acquaintance, she called on the pretext of catching up. She thought about calling him directly. She decided against it. She called her lawyer instead. Her lawyer was a woman named Ellen Park who had handled the divorce and who had, over the 2 years since, become something closer to a trusted advisor than a professional contact. Ellen listened to everything Laura told her. She asked to see photographs of both envelopes. She said she would have a colleague reach out to Paul Crane's attorney to make a preliminary inquiry. She also said something that Laura had been thinking but hadn't wanted to say out loud. She said, "Laura, I want you to consider whether this might not be Paul." Laura said, "It has to be Paul. Who else would?" Ellen said, "That's exactly my point. You've been in Millhaven for 2 years. You've built a life there. Are there other people? Anyone who might have a reason?" And then she thought about something she had been trying not to think about. 8 months ago, Laura had briefly dated someone. A man named David, whom she had met through a mutual friend at a dinner party. They had gone on 4 dates over the course of 6 weeks. He was pleasant and attentive, and the dates had been enjoyable in a mild, comfortable way that she had appreciated after the turbulence of the past few years. And then on the 5th planned date, something had happened that had ended things. He had mentioned something she had told him on the first date. A small detail, something about a restaurant she had been to in her 20s, a place that had closed years ago. She remembered telling him this. She remembered him listening. But then on the 5th date, he had added a detail she had not told him. A specific detail about the restaurant. The name of a dish, the color of the wallpaper, that she had not mentioned, that she was certain she had not mentioned. She had asked him how he knew. He had said she must have told him. He had been so certain about it that she had doubted herself, briefly, and then later, at home, she had been sure. She had not told him. She was certain of it. She had cancelled the 5th date by text. She had not explained why. He had responded politely and had not pushed. She had told herself she was being paranoid, that she had probably told him and forgotten, that it was nothing. She had not thought about it again until this moment. She told Ellen about David. Ellen said, "Do you know his last name?" Laura said his last name was Reyes. Ellen said, "I'll look into both of them." The 3rd envelope arrived 6 days after the 2nd. This one was different. The photograph inside showed her house at night, taken from outside, from the street or close to it. Her lights were on inside. Her silhouette was visible through the curtains she had closed. He had been there after she closed the curtains. He had stood outside her house and photographed the light she made inside it, and he wanted her to know. She called the police. A different officer this time, a detective named Sarah Voss, assigned to the case after the 2nd report had flagged it as a pattern. Detective Voss came within an hour. She took the photograph. She walked the perimeter of Laura's property. She asked questions with the focused precision of someone who understood that the window for acting on these cases was narrow and who intended to use it. She asked about Paul Crane. She asked about David Reyes. She said she would run both names. She said, I want you to stay somewhere else tonight. Do you have somewhere you can go?" Laura said yes. She stayed with a friend in the next town for 3 nights. When she came back, her front door had a new deadbolt that Detective Voss had arranged for a locksmith to install. There were no more envelopes that week. Ellen Park called on a Thursday morning with results. Paul Crane had an alibi for the approximate period when the first photograph had been taken. He had been at a work conference in Denver, confirmed by hotel records and witness statements from colleagues. He was eliminated. David Reyes was more complicated. Ellen had found him through a combination of professional networks and public records. He was 44 years old. He worked as a freelance photographer. He lived in a town 40 miles from Millhaven. He also had a history. A restraining order had been filed against him by a woman in 2019. The order had been granted and had lapsed after 2 years. The woman had moved out of state. Ellen had also found something else. David Reyes had lived in Millhaven from 2019 to 2021. Before Laura had moved there. Before they had met at a dinner party. Before he had seemed like a stranger. Detective Voss drove to where David Reyes lived on a Tuesday morning. He was home. He answered the door. Detective Voss described what followed in her report as a textbook interview. The subject was cooperative, answered questions readily, maintained consistent eye contact. He said he had no contact with Laura Crane, since their brief dating period ended 8 months ago. He said he wished her well. He said he was sorry to hear she had been experiencing harassment. He said all the right things. He said them very smoothly. Detective Voss noted in her report that he had a camera bag visible on the kitchen table. Standard equipment for a photographer. She noted that the bag contained lenses, one of which, based on its size, was consistent with a telephoto lens capable of the kind of distance photography evident in the envelope photographs. She could not search the bag without a warrant. She applied for a warrant the following morning. What the warrant revealed, 4 days later, changed the nature of the investigation. A professional-grade DSLR found in the camera bag on the kitchen table. There were photographs of Laura Crane, dating back 14 months. Not 3. 14! He had been photographing her since before they met. He had images of her in the grocery store, in the parking lot of her gym, at a coffee shop she went to twice a week, walking her neighbor's dog, which she sometimes did as a favor. He had been watching her for over a year before he had introduced himself at a dinner party. The dinner party, Detective Voss determined after further investigation, had not been a coincidence. David Reyes knew the mutual friend who had hosted it. He had arranged to be introduced. He had engineered the meeting. He had photographed her first and then put himself in a position to meet her. The detail about the restaurant, the detail he had known that she hadn't told him. He had known it because he had been there with her, not sitting with her, at another table across the room, watching. David Reyes was arrested on charges of stalking, criminal harassment, and unlawful surveillance. The woman who had filed the 2019 restraining order was contacted. She agreed to speak with investigators. What she described was a pattern almost identical to what Laura had experienced, beginning with surveillance, progressing to contact, progressing to a relationship she had not understood, was constructed until it was already happening. That woman had moved to another state. She had changed her name. She had rebuilt her life from the ground up. She said, when Detective Voss spoke with her, "I never thought anyone would believe me. I never thought anyone would put it together." She said, "How did you find out?" Detective Voss said, "Someone mailed herself the evidence." David Reyes pleaded guilty to 3 of the 6 charges. He was sentenced to 4 years. He was placed on a registry. Laura Crane stayed in Millhaven. She opened her curtains again. Not immediately. It took several months before that felt possible. But she opened them. She kept the security cameras. They have never shown anything concerning. She checks them occasionally, the way you check a lock that you know is secure. But check anyway, because the checking is part of how you feel safe again. She still lives alone. She still works remotely. She still goes to the coffee shop twice a week. And sometimes she thinks about what she now knows. That there was once a man sitting across the room from her watching, and she had no idea, and she lets herself feel the discomfort of it. And then she orders her coffee and opens her laptop and goes on with her day. Because going on with your day is an act of refusal. Because the alternative is to close the curtains forever. And she has decided she is done closing curtains. The photographs, all 14 months of them, were entered into evidence and are now sealed as part of an ongoing legal record. Laura has seen some of them, not all. She saw enough to understand the scope of what had been done. She said, in a statement released after the sentencing, one thing that she wanted people to understand. She said, "He made me feel crazy for noticing, for the detail about the restaurant, for the feeling I had. I almost talked myself out of it. I almost decided it was nothing." She said, "Trust the feeling. When something is wrong, something is wrong. You are not imagining it." She said, "I mailed myself the evidence because I needed someone to take it seriously." She said, "Sometimes that someone has to be you." This story is fictional and created for entertainment purposes only.